Okay, so here we are again, part 3 of chapter 1. This is a long chapter. So when we left off, Tom and Lucy were inside the secret room, and they had discovered there was a little table and chairs. The table is actually made out of a tin can, I think from peas or something. That's why, can you see it says the word peas on it? They make their furniture and things. It's a birthday candle on there. And then there's a whole bunch of papers. So they saw a small table and a chair in the room, just like the ones the Littles had in their apartment. The table was covered in papers. Lucy ran to the window and looked out. "There's the Biggs' yard," she said. "But where are we, Tom? Where on earth is this room?" "It must be behind the chimney in the attic." Do you know what an attic is?
Yeah.
Like the top of the house is like this, and the rooms are down here on the house. But in this space up here, sometimes it's just empty. That's called an attic.
I think that's what mine.
Ethan, you want to put your hand up? Right? So, it must be behind the chimney in the attic, Tom said. "Well, whose room is it?" said Lucy. "We've never seen this room before." Tom picked up some of the papers from the table, and he blew off some of the dust. If they're dusty, what does that tell you?
They're old.
They're old, right? "It was used by a tiny person, that's for sure, but nobody's been here for a very long time." "Tom," said Lucy in her quietest voice, "let's keep it a secret. Let's not tell anyone. It can be our secret room." Tom looked down at the yellowed old papers, and he shook his head. Now, do you think he's shaking his head like this?
No.
"We can't do that, Lucy. We can't keep it a secret. We have to tell Mother and Father right away." "Why?" asked Lucy. "What did you see, Tom?" "These papers belonged to Grandpa Little.
Oh,
That's why. This room,
he was in a war.
he must have come here and no one knew." Now, what is your brain thinking, Nora?
He went to a war.
What were you thinking, Eli?
That was Uncle Pete's dead brother.
Do you remember in the last story, Uncle Pete said he lost his brother in the Great Mouse War? So Eli's thinking maybe it's Uncle Pete's brother that used to have this room. Nora's thinking it's Grandpa Little and he had gone to war. So was Grandpa Little in the last story?
No.
But did it mention anything about Grandpa Little?
I know that.
Just wait, come on. Did it mention anything about Grandpa Little? We haven't even heard about him. There's Granny. And where there's a Granny, there must be a Grandpa. But there's been no talk of Grandpa. Grandpa Little? Just listen. Grandpa Little, said Lucy. But he disappeared years ago. Everybody says he's probably dead. Lucy sat down at the chair. Everyone except Granny Little. She thinks that Grandpa Little is still alive somewhere, doesn't she? I think she does. But she never talks about him. Didn't she like Grandpa? Well, there was never a clue, said Tom. Not even one teeny clue about what happened to Grandpa when he disappeared. Tom looked at Lucy. Gee, maybe there's something in all these old papers that'll be a clue. And he held up a bunch of the papers. "Look, here's some kind of a diary." What's a diary? A book where you write about what you're doing, right? "Here's some kind of a diary and some old maps. We have to tell Mother and Father right away," said Tom. "But Lucy, we can't tell Granny." "Why not?" "She's kind of funny about Grandpa." Funny, haha? Or funny gets strange feelings?
Yeah.
Dad will have to decide what to do about that. But why shouldn't we tell her? It's her husband. You just said that Granny thinks Grandpa is still alive. I bet she doesn't really think that. I think she's just hoping, but you know, we shouldn't really ever talk about him, ever. Well, what does that mean? Dad says if someone you love just disappeared, it's worse than if he had died. You would hope that he was alive, but you'd think maybe he was dead. And just wondering about whether he's alive or dead would be absolutely awful.